For that introduction, and thank you so much for coming out on this Tuesday night. I'm so pleased to be here with Luis,
Thank you for having me.
of course, CEO and founder of Duolingo, the popular online language learning tool. It's an app, it's a website, it's a bit of everything. How many of you, by the way, have used Duolingo? Wow. Are you still using it? Have you learned? That's pretty good. I was using it to learn Japanese for a few hours or a few minutes, and then I was like, I have to get back to work. But I was really excited about it. And as mentioned, before Duolingo, Luis co-created CAPTCHA, which is that picture test where Google forces you to check all the fire hydrants to prove that you're not a bot, right? We're going to talk about both his companies, but we're going to start with his early life, because that's where a lot of this started. By the way, how many languages do you speak?
That's a complicated question. My native language is Spanish. I speak English. Pretty good at Portuguese. I can watch Netflix shows in French, but my pronunciation is horrible. And I'm learning Swedish because I happen to be engaged to a Swedish woman. But Swedish is, sorry if there are any Swedes here, is the most useless language to learn because they all speak English. And so, yeah.
Well, you can understand what Lucas Mattsson is saying in Succession with his friends.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah. All right, so how many of those did you learn through Duolingo?
Everything except for English and Spanish.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, French, Swedish?
Portuguese, yeah.
Portuguese?
And yeah.
So it's not immediately clear based on your last name, Van An, that you're a native Spanish speaker, born and raised in Guatemala by a single mother. When did you learn English?
Very early, I'd say I happened to go to an American school, which was the best school in Guatemala. So I was fortunate that I learned English early.
Okay, so you grew up speaking English and Spanish. There's a story about your mother, who obviously is a huge influence in your life, about how she brought home a Commodore 64, old school PC, when you were hoping for a video game console. What were you looking for, a Nintendo?
A Nintendo.
And she brought you home this PC instead?
Yeah, I was 8. I think I was 8. All my friends had Super Mario Brothers, and I begged for a long time, and then she came home with a Commodore 64, and I was very pissed. And then I had to learn how to use it.
At what point did you look at it and say, all right, I'll try to figure this out. Let me play around with it?
The same day, but it took me a while. I mean, it took me a while because back then, for those of you who are as old as I am, it was impossible to use computers. They're really hard to use, and so I had to figure out how to use it. And I bought some magazines to try to, and there were some of the magazines came with programs that you had to retype the whole thing to make it run, and so that's what I did.
But this was a big turning point in your life in terms of setting you on a direction, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I got good with computers. And then I discovered that I could buy some games for it. I forced my mom to buy me some games. And then I discovered that you could actually copy. They all had copy protection, but I discovered you could actually copy the games by looking at some hidden files. And then I started swapping games with adults that lived near me. And it was kind of weird. There would be, it's just me and my mother, and sometimes there would be like a 30-year-old dude who would come and ring the doorbell and said, I heard this is where I can swap my games.
You're like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, at some point my mom forbade that, but I got a lot of games by swapping.
So you obviously developed an interest in computers, but you decided to major in math at Duke. And I know in the past you've talked about how the pace in which problems are solved in mathematics was kind of a turnoff for you because it took too long.
Well, yeah, I mean, my dream since I was maybe 12 was to become a math professor in a university. That was my dream.
What 12-year-old dreams of being a math professor?
I did, and first I don't know why. I must watch some movie or something. But I really wanted to do that. I came to the U.S. In fact, the reason I came to the U.S. was to study math because I couldn't get a math major in Guatemala, which was ridiculous. So I came to get a math major, and then I visited PhD programs in math, and I got turned off because you would talk to professors and they would say, oh, I'm working on a problem that hasn't been solved in 400 years. And I'm like,
chances are I'm not going to solve it either.
You're not going to solve it either, no, nor am I. Whereas in computer, and this is when I switched to computer science because everybody in computer science at the time, and it's still true, such a young field, everybody was talking about, you would visit professors and they would tell you, oh, I just solved an open problem yesterday. So this is much faster moving, and I'm very glad I did that. I think I just, in retrospect, I just wasn't smart enough for math. But
No,
I'm
you
very
were
happy.
impatient. You wanted results.
Also not smart enough for it, but yeah.
All right, so how did you become part of the team that developed CAPTCHA? Because that was in grad school, right?
That was my first month in grad school, actually. I enrolled in the PhD program at Carnegie Mellon University. Sorry, Cornell. I went to Carnegie Mellon University. And I was a first-year PhD program, and I went to hear a talk by the guy who at the time was the chief scientist of Yahoo. Now, at the time, Yahoo, this is the year 2000, Yahoo was like the Google of today. It's like the biggest thing. And he had a talk about 10 problems they didn't know how to solve at Yahoo. One of the problems that they had was that people were writing programs to obtain millions of email accounts for free. So Yahoo would give email accounts for free, and the people who were writing these programs were spammers. So if you wanted to send spam from Yahoo accounts, you ran into the problem that each account only allowed you to send 500 emails per day. And if you wanted to send millions of emails per day, you needed to own millions of email accounts from which you could send 500 emails per day. So they would write a program to do that, and they didn't know how to stop it. And so I listened to that talk. I went home. I started thinking about it. And then together with my PhD advisor, I had just gotten a PhD advisor, we started thinking about how to solve this problem. And we came up with this idea that you can test whether the thing that's trying to get the email account is actually a human and not a computer. Because a human's not going to get a million email accounts because they get bored. Computers can. So we just came up with this test, and then we came up with the idea, and then we came up with this test that was just this squiggly characters. Turned out at the time, this is no longer true, but at the time, computers couldn't read distorted squiggly characters. So the idea is we would just give random letters that were all distorted.
Like little r, big B, 653.
Yeah, and then all this like mushed up. And it turned out computers couldn't do it, but humans could. So whenever we displayed that, and if the answer was entered correctly, it meant there was a human behind the computer, and it meant that we would give, this would allow us to give them the email account, and that actually solved the problem.
So you eventually gave the CAPTCHA program to Yahoo for free, right?
Yeah, very quickly. I mean, we basically came up with the idea. It didn't occur to us that we could make money off of it. So we were just like, hey, we know how to solve your problem. So we told them, and once you hear the idea, it's pretty obvious that it'll work. Mm-hmm. And within 2 or 3 weeks, they had it in the registration form at Yahoo. And then within a few months, most every website had copied this.
That must be so gratifying, seeing it put into action right away.
It was very gratifying. We were very happy with it. Later, it occurred to us we probably could have asked for money.
So if you could do it all over again, you would ask for money?
Maybe, but I mean, in the end, it worked out. But yeah, later, it occurred to us.
Okay, well, you did get a chance to ask for money later on because you weren't done with it, you improved upon it, and then you came up with reCAPTCHA, and then you sold that to Google. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was, so if you don't know the difference, okay, so a CAPTCHA is just, what it was, it's a test that can distinguish humans from computers, okay. We started that, that was the year 2000, about maybe 5 years had passed, and I would go to parties and people would ask me what I did. I eventually explained that I invented that thing. Everybody would say, I hate you, and because they're so annoying, they are. And so I started thinking, can we do something to make this less annoying, or at least, kind of do something about it? And then I also started thinking, oh wow, at the time, it's about 200 million times a day somebody was doing that. And I thought, okay, 200 million times a day, it takes 10 seconds to do one of these. So humanity as a whole is wasting 500,000 hours every day because of this thing that I did, and I started feeling bad about it. So I started
Even though you solved a problem here.
Yeah, but I was like, okay, it's such a waste of time. So I started thinking, can we make good use of those 10 seconds? See, the thing is, during those 10 seconds while you're writing a CAPTCHA, your brain was doing something that computers could not do. Computers couldn't read that. So you're doing something very valuable, something computers couldn't do. So could we get you to do something useful too? And that's when reCAPTCHA, this idea for reCAPTCHA came along, which was not only could we get people to authenticate themselves as humans, but we could also get them to help us solve problems computers couldn't solve. And in particular, the first one that we did was getting people to help us digitize books. So the way it worked is, at the time, there were all these projects trying to digitize all of the world's books. About 100 million books had been written before the computer era. Mm-hmm. They needed to be put on the internet. Mm-hmm. The way you do that is you scan every page of the book. And then after scanning, by the way, scanning a page, like taking a digital photograph of every page. The next step is that the computer needs to be able to decipher all of the words and turn them into text. But at the time, for the same reason that computers couldn't read CAPTCHAs, they couldn't decipher all of the words because sometimes the scan was not clear or the pages had turned yellow of the book, and so the letters look all blurry. So the computer couldn't actually understand about 30% of the words. So the idea was, okay, let's take all the words that the computer could not understand, which, by the way, there was an amazing thing. The computer knew when it couldn't understand the word. So we could take all the ones that the computer couldn't understand, and then we could send them to people while they're typing CAPTCHAs on the internet. So as opposed to being random letters anymore, they were words that were coming from books that the computer could not recognize, and we would use, whenever somebody was buying tickets on Ticketmaster or whatever, we would use what they entered to help digitize that one word and put it back into the book. So that was the idea with reCAPTCHA. It worked out really well, and we started digitizing at a pretty fast pace. And at some point, I sold that to Google to help with the book digitization process. But over time, the idea morphed because not only could you do the same trick with books, you could also use the same trick for when computers cannot recognize a traffic light. And so this is what you see now. You see bicycles, traffic lights, et cetera, because it's what you're getting from self-driving cars.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, mapping software and self-driving cars, whenever they can't recognize something, or the computer's not very confident about it, it gets sent to a human to tag the data.
We're helping Google automation figure out what's a traffic light.
That is the idea now.
Okay, got it. All right, so you sold that to Google as opposed to CAPTCHA, which you gave to Yahoo. At 30 years old, you became a multimillionaire. What then prompted you to think about starting a language learning tool? What was the aha moment that led to that?
So I had just sold this company to Google. By the way, at the time, I was a professor at Carnegie Mellon. I had stayed at Carnegie Mellon. I became a professor.
Computer science
professor. And great, I had sold this company, and I wanted to do something. I still wanted to do more projects, and I wanted to do something this time not to make money, but for something that I was really passionate about. It's not like I was very passionate about, I don't know, annoying people with distorted letters. But I was very passionate about education, and I wanted to do something related to education. So I wanted to do something related to education, and also I had just taken a new PhD student, whose name is amazing, by the way. His name is Severin, and his last name is Hacker. This is a computer science PhD student. The reason I took him as a PhD student, to be very honest, was because of his last name. I'm like, this guy's awesome. And so I had just taken a new PhD student, and the first thing you need to do when you take a new PhD student is you need to find a PhD thesis for them. So we were thinking, okay, what is your PhD thesis going to be about? And we both started thinking, okay, well, let's do something related to education. That's what we knew. And so that was one point. Another point is I thought, well, I grew up in Guatemala, which is a poor country. And a lot of people talk about education, something that brings equality to different social classes, but I always saw it as the opposite, as something that brings inequality, because what happens in practice, especially in poor countries or poor regions, is that people who have money can buy themselves a really good education and therefore continue having a lot of money, whereas people who don't have very much money barely learn how to read and write, and therefore never make a lot of money. So I thought, okay, let's do something with education, and let's do something that gives equal access to education as much as we can to people. So that's what we thought, and then we started thinking, okay, well, education, what should we teach? And we started thinking, well, should we teach, well, maybe we should teach math. We both love math. Maybe we should teach computer science. Eventually, we settled on teaching languages, and it's kind of not super clear why we would start with that, but in retrospect, I'm very happy we made that decision. At the time, the reason we thought that was, number one, English. There is a huge number of people in the world that are learning English and that need to learn English. Because in most countries in the world, knowledge of English increases your income potential. So, okay, we thought there's this huge audience. Not only is there a huge audience, the other thing about English is this amazing thing that knowledge of English directly increases your income potential, which is not normal for other subjects. So for example, if you learn math, just knowing math doesn't allow you to make more money, because usually you have to learn math to learn physics, to then become an engineer. It's like multiple steps. But if you know English, if you are a waiter and now you learn English, you can be a waiter at a hotel and make more money. So it's just like directly, you can make more money. And so we thought, okay, this is great, but if we're going to teach English, may as well teach other languages. So we decided, fine, let's make a thing that teaches languages over the internet for free.
Open Pandora's box, basically.
Yeah, and that was it. And so that's how we got started.
How did you decide on the execution once you decided what you're going to do? Because at one point, I believe you considered building a business model based on reCAPTCHA?
Similar. So there's a couple of things that we decided on. So the first thing was when we got started, we started building it, and then we thought, okay, well, to test our thing before we launch it, let's kind of make sure that it kind of works. So I'm a native Spanish speaker, so I decided I'm going to make a thing to learn Spanish. I'm going to make the first Spanish course, and you, Severin, you're going to learn Spanish. He didn't know any Spanish. And he is a native German speaker, and he made the German course. I later found out, he's actually not a native German speaker. He's a native Swiss German speaker, and I thought they were the same language, but it turns out they are not. They are different. I really was so clueless. I was like, German. Anyways, he made a first German course, which actually was a Swiss German course. And so we started learning each other's language. And we ran into our first problem, which was we would show up at work every day at like 9, and I would ask him, hey, did you do your Spanish lesson yesterday? He'd be like, no, man. It was so boring. And then I would, yeah, me neither. God, so boring. And so we ran into this problem that we just could not get ourselves to do it.
It was too boring.
It was too boring. And so, and then we thought, okay, we're in real trouble because we're very committed to this project and we can't get ourselves to use our own thing. How can we get other people to get ourselves? So this is when we decided, okay, look, and we realized something that I still believe today. The hardest thing about learning something by yourself is staying motivated. This is certainly true for learning a language. This is anything that you learn by yourself, the hardest thing is staying motivated. And so we thought, okay, well, let's work on getting people to stay motivated. So we added progress bars to the whole thing. We added points. Then we had a little leaderboard between the two of us. And all of that actually made us use it. And so the first thing we learned is, okay, well, you have to make it fun. So by the time we launched, it was a free way to learn languages that was also fun. And at some point, we're like, well, we need to make money off of it. And the first idea was essentially a very similar idea to the reCAPTCHA, which was, okay, as people are, rather than charging people, because we wanted it to be free, as people are learning languages, we're going to get them to help us translate stuff. So the idea is like, okay, if you've learned something, right after your lesson, we're going to tell you, hey, you want to practice more? Here is a news article that was written in Spanish. Can you help us translate it to English or something
We're going to put people to work.
Yeah, that was the idea, in exchange for teaching them.
Yeah.
So that was the idea, and it worked. We actually made that work. But the problem, and we even had a client. We had two clients. We had BuzzFeed and CNN, which would send us their news, and then our users would actually translate that news from English to other languages. And it actually worked. The problem is, it gave very little money. You can't make a lot of money from translation. Yeah. And also translation was just kind of getting much better by computer. So we thought, very quickly, within maybe, a few months, we scrapped this idea. And then we decided to go at it with no business model. We're like, all right, we're just going to build this, and we'll see what happens later.
See them come. Okay, so you did get funding, though, from
we did.
Union Square
First funders were Union Square Ventures.
Okay, yes. And Tim Ferriss, the investor, Ashton Kutcher of the 70s Show also invested. What was your pitch then to them if you didn't make any money?
Our pitch was, we're going to teach people languages, and we're going to figure it out later. And much later, so Union Square invested. Much later, Brad Burnham, who was the partner that invested in us, who was on our board much later, he told me, when you left there, we really liked you. We thought there's no way you're going to make money off of that. But over time, you were probably going to pivot to something else, and we just wanted to invest in you. I mean, that was because I think our pitch was really not very convincing about us making money. I mean,
They're like, we believe in you, we don't believe in the idea.
I think that's what happened. I mean, they didn't think we were going to make money.
Okay, but you did, and it became a real business. What is the business model today? Because it is free for most users. Yeah. There's in-app purchases. You can upgrade to a subscription model, right?
Yeah, that's it. So what happened is we launched Duolingo in 2012. And we were very fortunate. We started growing a lot. Because it was free and fun, we started growing a lot. And we had, at some point, we got to a point where we had more people learning languages on Duolingo than in the US, than in the whole US public school system. Still, we weren't making any money, though. At some point around 2016, we decided, okay, we have to make Duolingo self-sustaining. I mean, the way we were supporting ourselves, by the way, was just by raising more and more venture capital. We'd just be like, okay, can we raise another round? We can raise another round. And,
doable in the days of zero interest rates.
Exactly. They kept on, well, the last round that we raised, the valuation must have been about $500 million. Zero revenue. And it was Google. It was Google. And the partner from Google that invested in us, Leila, she's amazing. She sat me down at a bar, made sure that I had already 2 drinks. And she said, Luis, nobody else is going to invest in you. Like Google's the biggest fool. You cannot find a bigger fool. Like you just can't. You have to figure out how to make money. And I said, well, but we're giving it language education for free. That's what we want to do.
She's like, the music is going to stop soon.
Yes, and she was right. So we decided, okay, well, we have to figure out how to make it sustainable. But we had this big problem that we wanted Duolingo to remain free. This was the big. It's a very mission-driven company. We really want to offer education for free. So we're like, well, the easiest way to make money is just to charge people. We can't do that. We can't just charge people to do that. So we ended up with this freemium business model, which is, at the time this was not as popular. Now it's a pretty popular business model. It's kind of what Spotify does or what the dating apps do, which is it's free. You can learn as much as you want on it for free. We will not stop you. But if you do not pay, you have to see some ads. And if it turns out you don't like ads, you can pay to subscribe, and it turns off the ads, and it gives you a few more perks. And that's how we make money, this combo of ads and subscription. It turns out today, 92% of our users use it for free, so they monetize through ads. 8% pay us to subscribe, but that 8% that pay us to subscribe give us about 75% of our revenue. So the vast majority of our revenue comes from the people who pay to subscribe. So we're essentially a subscription business. But what I really like about this model, and it's really exactly what we wanted to do, you know who the people are who pay to subscribe? Rich people. They're not rich. They're like well off, globally well off, like New Yorkers. They pay to subscribe. You know who doesn't pay? People from Brazil or people from Vietnam. So in the end, we're basically getting well-off people to pay for education of everyone, which is exactly, it's like a small form of wealth redistribution, which I really like.
So you said the breakdown was 92% to 8%. What do you want it to look like over time?
We don't know. It's funny. We don't have a target. Now that we're a publicly traded company, investors are like, you're under-monetized. It should be higher, that people that pay you. I don't know what it'll end up being. I do know that we can increase it. It's been increasing. So that 8% is 8% today. Last year it was 7%. The year before that it was like 5%. It's been increasing up 1 to 2 percentage points per year. And it's just because we get better at knowing how to get people to subscribe. What I want personally is if for you, call it $7 a month is not a lot of money, and you use Duolingo and actually get value of it from it, you should pay us. That's how I feel. But if it turns out that $7 a month is too much for you, fine, use it for free. That's kind of what I actually want. Of course, you can't just tell people that. You have to kind of find product features that get the right people to subscribe. But that's what I want. Our belief is that so we compare, dating apps are pretty comparable to us. If you look at dating apps, it's about 15% of the people that pay them. So our belief is there's no reason why we can't get from 8 to 15%.
Gotcha.
But it's kind of hard to know exactly where it'll end up.
Now you target the consumer, and your focus is on the consumer,
Entirely
not on
consumer.
businesses. Why not look at businesses? Because they could, you could satisfy all those investors who are saying, you are under monetizing.
A number of reasons. First of all, I don't have any problem selling to businesses. It just so happens that I think you can sell. We're not mission critical is the problem for selling to businesses. It's nice that people learn French, but usually if people actually if a business actually wants their workforce to know French, they usually hire people who already know French. So we're not quite mission critical. If you sell management training, if you sell diversity training, that is mission critical to businesses. I don't think we are mission critical to business, so we can have a business that sells to businesses, but I don't think it's a particularly exciting one. I also personally am not excited by it. I think, this is going to sound terrible, but I think selling to business kind of B2B software, it's all really shitty. And there's a reason for it. It's because you're not actually designing for the actual person who uses it. You're designing for the head of HR. They're the one who pay you or whatever, not the actual person who uses it. So I want to make good software, and so that's why we do consumer.
It's less about teaching the language and more about satisfying, checking off boxes.
Yes, and I don't like that. I really want to make a big difference in the world. I also think, by the way, I think that the consumer business for language education is humongous. It's about $60 billion a year. So we have a lot of room to grow. So
without having to dip into businesses.
Yeah, so I don't think, we don't need to do this. And we're also, as a company, we've managed to build a very, very consumer-driven company. And so that's our strength. That's where we'll stay.
Well, one thing users love about Duolingo is that it's fun. It's like a game, right? You're just saying you play for a while and then you don't want to see the ad, then you pay for it. People can pick and choose their lessons. They can jump around. But last year, you changed your approach to a more conventional format, prescribed path of lessons where people have to follow this laid out path. Was this something investors were pushing for? What prompted this?
No, you'd be surprised how little we listen to investors. Nothing against investors. We do what we think is best for the company. We didn't do that change to make more money. In fact, here's basically, if you don't know what happened, is the home screen of Duolingo used to be such that you could kind of pick, you had a lot of choice about what you could learn. We've changed it so that now it's a pretty linear path. You as a user are much more encouraged to just follow our path.
It'll guide you along to where you go next,
Yes.
as opposed to picking from an assortment of games.
And the reason, there's a couple of reasons we changed it, but the biggest one is because we were convinced we could teach better using this. And it's because what was going on is roughly 20% of our users that were coming to Duolingo before the change were doing a lesson that was just to satisfy the streak that was way too easy for them, but they were just addicted to their streak, and the lesson was way too easy, and they weren't actually learning anything.
The streak of how many times they went on, they went
daily
on every
streak,
day.
yes.
Yeah.
And so it was 20% of our daily users were doing something where they were learning nothing, and I didn't like that. And we're like, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to force them to go down a path, and we're going to make it so that if you come to Duolingo and you spend 3 minutes on it, those 3 minutes you will learn something. And so we made that change, and that is the main reason for the change. It worked. It did that. It did not make us any more money. It didn't make us less money, but it didn't make us any more money. It didn't change engagement, as in like basically the same amount of time is spent on Duolingo. But it is now the case that if you come, you're way more likely to actually learn something as opposed to slack off. So that was it. That was the reason for the change.
Calling out slackers, essentially.
It's kind of like, yeah, now, okay, you come here, you got to learn something. That was the idea for the change.
And it's because it made a lot of people mad, though. Like, people went on TikTok and they were complaining about it. They overtook the comments section.
It's true. It is funny. It made a lot of people upset. But if you were to look at what people were saying, for example, we have a subreddit that is very large and very active. If you looked at what people were saying, you would have thought that all our users had left because they're like, I've stopped using Duolingo because of this. It turns out that our metrics were very positive. I mean, people were not stopping to use it. They were continuing to use it.
They were just complaining.
They were just complaining. But it makes sense. We knew this because here's the thing. We have worked for the last 10 years to make Duolingo a habit-forming app. We have formed a strong habit on these people. So it's like being, having like the habit of doing your elliptical every morning. And it just turned out that you've been doing it for many years, and you show up one day and all the buttons have changed, and you're like, fuck, what is this? And so it makes sense that they were not happy about it, but by now they've gotten used to it again.
So I mentioned TikTok. Obviously, you have a very, very vibrant presence on TikTok and other social media platforms. Are current users more likely to stay engaged as a result of your social media presence? What does your data show you? Our data shows us that TikTok in particular is responsible for about 10% of our new users. So our new users, which by the way is a very large number of users that come in every day, about 10% of them say, when we ask them, hey, how did you learn about Duolingo, or what made you start Duolingo? TikTok, the answer is about 10%. So we're very happy with it, and I think we've just taken a very good strategy with social media, which is, I think, rather than trying to have things that really look like ads, we just make things that are entertaining and that really feature the personality of our owl mascot. And I think that has been very successful. Yeah, he has quite the personality. He does. He likes to, he really, really, really wants you to do your language lesson. He really wants that. You also launched Duolingo ABC, which is basic reading and literacy, and Duolingo Math, which is basic math skills. These are all free apps as well? Right now they're free, and right now they're free, as in we have no way of making money off of them because we don't even have a subscription for them. Right now they're just free. They're just there. They're just there and they're free. Obviously we're going to monetize them, but right now they're in the stage where, as a company, our belief is for products to first grow organically
And once they have a pretty good user base that grew organically, we can start monetizing. And so both of these are growing. They're growing very nicely, but they're not, they don't, we're expecting for them, or we're waiting for them to get to about 1 million daily active users. And when they do, we'll start monetizing. Neither of them are there, but they're growing very nicely.
Are you going after Kumon or something with these two?
I don't, we don't see it like we're going after anything. We try to do things that we think will help the world and that people want to learn. And we think, in particular with math, we think there's a real need for the entire population to be slightly more math literate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of math anxiety that we're trying to reduce with an app like that. And what's interesting is for the math app, we started, we're going to add a lot more content. Right now we have 3rd and 4th grade content, which is like fractions and stuff like that. What's interesting is it's about 60% of our users are adults. And it's because it's exactly the right level of math. 3rd grade is exactly the right level of math that challenges adults, but they still can do it. If we had done like 7th grade math, it's like, turns out adults can't really do 7th grade math.
Or are interested in doing it.
Maybe they are, but they just sort of can't do it. But 3rd grade math, they can.
Oh, that invites all kinds of questions. Your next offering is Duolingo Music. When does this happen?
We don't have a precise launch date. What we're telling people, and it's the most truthful thing I can say is, I hope it's this year.
Okay.
And it's just we just have not quite settled on all the things, but I think it'll be this year. And yeah, we'll be teaching music. I'm very excited by it. I have the app on my phone. It's really fun.
It's just to teach people how to be music literate, to read music?
Yeah, so with music you have this one problem that you need them to have an instrument if you're going to teach them to play an instrument. So we're deciding to not do that. And so we're going to teach them, we basically have like a little piano in the app. And so we're going to teach them how to read music and a lot of stuff. Maybe over time, when we have a more advanced course, we're going to require people to have an instrument. But for now, we chose to not requiring people to have an instrument because that's actually a pretty big barrier. Especially, we're a very global company, and our users, only 20% of our users are in the US. So when you go to poor countries, it's very hard to assume that the people have a piano or whatever it is.
All right, AI and machine learning currently help users track their learning progress, right? It's employed, it's built into your programming. It allows you to zero in on their weak spots as well. You've been very outspoken about AI being a net positive for Duolingo in creating a more unique experience or through role-playing and real-time scenarios. Can you tell me a little bit more about what other ways you see AI improving your offerings in the next 5 years?
Yeah, for us, from the beginning, we realized, look, it goes back to the mission. We want to teach everyone. And we really want to teach everyone, and we want to teach everyone with the same quality of education. It's very hard to do that without doing it entirely with technology. If you're going to need to employ humans to teach everyone all over the world, you kind of need a lot of people and a lot of teachers. So we decided, look, we have to figure out how to do this with technology. And so the challenge then becomes, okay, how can you teach as well as a one-on-one human tutor, but without a one-on-one human tutor, with just technology? And the only, that tells you immediately, well, you have to figure out how to do that with AI.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, we've been, that's what we've tried to do. Over the last, over the last 10 years, we have figured out a few things. For example, we have a very sophisticated model that personalizes the lesson for each user to give them things that are exactly of the right difficulty just for them. And we know things, for example, because with Duolingo, we watch you, the program watches you learn. Whenever you do a lesson, if you get something wrong, it remembers it. And so we build a model for every user. So we know for that particular user, they may not be very good at the past tense.
Yeah.
So next time you start a lesson, we may give you more past tense things like that. So all of that we've done with AI is very good. And it keeps getting better and better. What has changed over the last few months is now we have this amazing thing of generative AI. And I think that's going to allow us to do a couple of things we were not able to do before. One of them is whenever you get something wrong, sometimes we could tell you why you got it wrong. But if you get something wrong with, if your answer is kind of free text response and you get it wrong, it was pretty hard for us to tell you what you did wrong was you did this thing, what a teacher would do. But now with generative AI, we actually can tell you, we give you an explanation of what you did wrong. So that's one thing. The other thing that used to be hard to do was practice multi-turn conversation. But now we can do that, and so that's another big thing that we're doing, practicing multi-turn conversation. So in general, I would say just at the high level, what we want to do is, today we believe Duolingo, and we have the measurement, Duolingo is as good as a language classroom, and we know that. But it is not as good as a one-on-one human tutor. What you'll see, hopefully over the next 5 years, is that we will become as good as a one-on-one language tutor. I hope so. I mean, I'm now talking about the future, maybe not, but that is our goal. Our goal is to be as effective as a one-on-one human tutor.
Right, because I think that's one of the criticisms that professional language teachers will make about Duolingo, which is it's great, it's fun, it's not as effective or impactful as it should be or claims to be, and it's more like a gateway drug rather than a way to achieve fluency in a new language.
Yeah, so we've never, for example, we've never claimed that we're as effective as a one-on-one human tutor because we're not. You can actually learn languages pretty well with Duolingo. There's a couple of things that we can do better at. The biggest one is this spontaneous conversation. That's where AI will come in, but spontaneous conversation, we're not very good at. We're very good at teaching you how to listen, how to read, how to write, but spontaneous conversation, we just haven't been. But I think with AI, we'll be a lot better.
And final question for you before we open it up to the audience. Japanese, I learned, is the third most requested language to learn in the US, and that's in large part because of the popularity of anime. And so you have a partnership with Crunchyroll, which is Sony's anime streaming platform service, and I see a lot of people nodding their heads because they know exactly what I'm talking about here. There's an effect that pop culture has on learning new languages, isn't there?
Yes.
What have you seen? What have you observed?
It is an amazing thing. We see it, and this is not something I expected. When the Squid Game came out, the number of Korean speakers went up, or learners went up by like 30%. When the Ukraine war started, the number of people learning Ukrainian on Duolingo, like, I don't know, it's like 600%. It went up by like 600%. And so it just every time that you see that something happens like that, what was it? Eurovision, this is a recent one. Like, I think Finland won Eurovision, was that it? Or it was very high up. And
Sweden?
Sweden won, and Finland was high up too. But I think both of those languages were increased quite a bit for us. So this is the type of stuff, like basically whenever something happens, we see it in our data, which is pretty amazing.
Has it ever predicted things that will happen? Like you'll see something, a spike in interest, and then you'll find out a few days later something happened?
Yes, but it's not that it predicted it. It's just that we didn't see that. We didn't know what it was. We just go and find an explanation. It's like, oh, that show came out, or whatever it is. Yeah.
All right, Luis, thank you so much. Let's open it up to the floor. We have some microphones available. This woman right here in the second row, can we hand her the mic? Here she is. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. This has nothing to do with tech, this question, but it's relevant because we're a media and a philanthropically interested company. Speaking of Tim Ferriss, I heard your podcast last year, and I heard the remarks that you made about the situation in Guatemala and your opinions on corruption and what your call to action to ask for help into combating that. Has anyone taken you up on that from our government or other governments to support you in that quest? But on the flip side, have you had any negative consequences? Has anyone, like, any threats or just any, like, bad publicity as a result of those courageous remarks?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I mean, it's something that I'm very passionate about. I am from Guatemala. I left when I was 17. If you don't know much about the country, it is insanely corrupt. I guess I'm like, I don't know if some people are like, you're a dissident. I don't know if I would call myself a dissident, but I speak a lot. I speak pretty loudly against the government. I don't, there hasn't been anything like, there's Twitter threats, like people are going to kill me, but whatever. That's just Twitter threats. In terms of help, the U.S. government actually does pay quite a bit of attention, especially the State Department. So yes, there's a lot of people talking about a lot of things. I don't know if anything very specific will happen soon. The thing that I'm very concerned about right now, which is related to what you're asking about, is the media. There was a really amazing story recently about from El País, which is a very large Spanish newspaper, about how bad the media is in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. In terms of not that the media is bad, how much under pressure they are. And so I now I bought, I guess, like 80% of the largest independent newspaper, and so I'm trying to support that, but that's a real problem in Guatemala.
A question over here, this gentleman.
Hi, Luis. My name's Dorian. Nice to meet you. I love you and hate you. I love you because I enjoy the app. I hate you because I'm on something like a 1,300-day streak, and I feel like if I break it, I don't know,
That's the idea. That's the idea. Don't break it. Don't break it.
I'm addicted, but I'm also learning Japanese, which includes, well, I'm shoring up my Japanese. I already speak it, but I'm learning new anime terms in which I really never had an interest. So, the diamond sword can be pulled from the rock.
Yeah.
But my question is this. So I also teach. I teach in media business, and I'm wondering if there's. It seems to me like many, almost any subject could be gamified. In fact, I applied for grants once to gamify media modeling, and we didn't get the grant. But I'm wondering if you think pretty much everything, even at like graduate level courses, financial modeling, can any education really be gamified? It seems like maybe the answer is overwhelmingly yes, but I'd be interested in your perspective.
Probably. I think most things can be gamified. I'll tell you a few things. There's some, if you're trying to gamify something, there's some kind of standard things that will work for anything. Like, as in, yeah, you probably should add points. You probably should have like a progress bar that fills up. Like, stuff like that kind of helps, and it probably will make your users more, or your learners more engaged. But if you really want to gamify something well, it's a bit of an artisanal thing. Like, you actually have to figure out how, it's very subject specific. And so, for example, some of the stuff that we know works for languages, we can't make it work for music. We have to do something different for music. So there's some stuff that works for everything. It's just, there's just some stuff that is very particular about languages that, for example, with languages, one of the ways that we, not gamify, but make it more entertaining is we write short stories for you to read. Can't quite do that with music, right? Because there's no short story for music. So there's stuff that is, on the flip side, on music, one of the ways in which you can gamify music is it turns out it's fun to tap stuff like that, but to a rhythm. You can't use that for languages. So what I'm saying is there's some things that gamify that apply kind of to most subjects, but if you want to do a really good job at gamifying something, I think you have to get in deep on the actual subject matter. And so that's the hard part. I do think most everything can be gamified, but if you want to do it well, there's some stuff that may just not be all that, the return on investment for gamifying some stuff may not be all that high. And so for us as a company, we're trying to do things that we think have a very wide audience and that we think will have a big impact in humanity, because each one is very hard to gamify. I mean, we're not done gamifying languages, for example. Every day is getting better and better. So that's it. But yes, I think there's a lot of potential for this.
This gentleman over here in the front row, can we bring him the mic? Right here.
Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Emmanuel. I flew in here from Houston this morning to hear you speak.
Wow.
Thank you so much to everyone for putting this event
coming.
on. So I just have a few notes. I'm going to reference my phone because I'm a little nervous talking to you. I think what you've done is amazing, and we're really lucky to be here in your presence. Thank you very much. So first of all, I'm the founder of Omelette News and Language Learning. I like my tongue-in-cheek way of explaining what the app is it's like Duolingo and Apple News had a love child.
Okay.
And so essentially, Omelette is the tip of the iceberg. Our goal is to help people understand and be fluent users of a language. And you mentioned El País. That's one of the news articles that we highlight on our application.
That's awesome.
So my question for you is, when it comes to language learning, how much do you think people value, or what do you think is the difference between how people value being basic users of a language and being fluent users of a language? And do you feel that there, in your several years of educating the globe in the process of becoming language learners, do you feel that people have a specific, is there a neuropsychological aspect to language learning that has yet to be untapped? Yeah,
that's a really good question about, so it really varies on a case-by-case basis for users. And if you want to look at aggregates, it really varies per country. In countries where people are learning English, they actually care about becoming fluent. Now, there's even nuances there. For example, in Mexico, it turns out the thing people care the most about is being able to understand, not speak it, because they feel left out when they don't understand it. But in a country like Japan, what they want to learn is actually to pronounce it. They all can read it, no problem, but they have trouble pronouncing it. So it really kind of depends on the region. In the US, by the way, the most common user of Duolingo, by the way, in the US, 80% of our users were not learning a language before Duolingo. And if you ask them, hey, so why are you using Duolingo? The most common answer is, well, I used to play a lot of Candy Crush or whatever, some game. And that was a complete waste of my time. Now, I use Duolingo, it's fun, and at the very least, I'm learning some Spanish. And you ask them, well, what would you do if Duolingo ceased to exist? They would say, the most common answer is, I would use Instagram more. And so it's just... It's
saving them from using Instagram.
I don't know if we're doing that, but it's just, what I'm saying is in the US, I don't think people, and of course I'm talking about averages here. I'm sure there are people in the US that care about fluency, that is for sure. But the majority of the people that are kind of learning French or Spanish, they're like, look, I understand that becoming perfectly fluent in Spanish will take me a very long time. I'm not sure if I'll ever make it, but it's pretty cool that now when I watch Narcos, I can understand half the words. So that is your average US user, and it's fine. I mean, I don't think you need to expect that all your users, and this is true if you teach anything, I don't think you need to expect that if you're teaching math, all your users are going to become, experts at differential equations. It's just, look, they got better at fractions. And so that's it, and so that's our own view, is that we're there, and if what you want to do is become fluent, or very fluent, then I think we're able to do that for you. But the one thing that people need to understand, especially for fluency, for getting very high levels of fluency, it will take a very long time. It just so happens learning a language well takes, 1,000 hours. That's it. It's just, we're not magical. Nobody's magical. You will need to spend 1,000 hours doing it. And so that's that. And sometimes people think that they can learn a language in 3 weeks, and that's just not the case.
Over here, that third row. Can we pass the microphone over?
Hi, my name is Joan Nye. My partner and I just found out today that we were accepted to a very prominent fellowship program with a really prominent think tank. Awesome. And the work that we're doing, thank you, is to develop what's called the Seminole Maroon Freedom Trail, which is the Seminole Maroons are the only Native American community tribe that was undefeated in U.S. history. And so part of the work that we're looking to do is to help with language and cultural preservation. The Seminole tribe, unlike your Navajo app, is only a few thousand survivors, or not survivors, but members of the tribe that are remaining. And so how, in the scheme of how you explore the different types of languages that you would look to develop, in the conversation, the grand scheme of Indigenous communities, would that fit into your model? Obviously, it's not going to be the moneymaker that you're looking for, but in terms of organizations and social causes that are looking to preserve these languages, given the fact that by 2050 there will only be about 20 native languages left, how can organizations like ours partner with you?
Yeah, it's a really excellent question. We've, by the way, for us internally, when we talk about something like adding a new language, and we've been very clear about this, we're done with adding languages in terms of monetary incentives. I mean, at this point, the distribution of learners is extremely skewed. For example, 50% of our users are learning English, 20% are learning Spanish, and 10% are learning French. So those 3 languages cover 80% of all users. All other languages we teach are 20%. And just to give you an idea, for example, Arabic, it's a huge language. 1% of our users are learning Arabic. So when we add a new language, no new language that we add at this point is going to be a big moneymaker. That's just not a thing. Like, if Arabic is 1% of our users, how many of our users do you think is going to be, some small indigenous language? But we do still add some of them because it's a lot, especially there's a lot of people, we hire a lot of linguists at Duolingo. There's a lot of people who that we have that believe in language preservation. So we do have that. But it's hard to prioritize given that each language that we add is many years of work to do it well. And there are 6,000 languages, and we have, I don't know, 42 that we have, so 42 out of 6,000. So it's been hard to prioritize which ones to add, but we are adding them. I think the biggest thing will be, can we make it so that we can add a language and make a really good job at it, as in have a very good course for it without that much effort? We're not there yet. We're at this point adding a new language. When we added Navajo, for example, it was a lot of work.
Do you want to pass the microphone to the gentleman who's right next to you, to your right?
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Cesar Martinez. Greetings from Ecuador.
Nice.
I came to do my master's degree and at some point start my PhD and all that stuff. My question to you is, you mentioned that you start with your grad student as a thesis project, Duolingo. When this became business? What was the inflection point to say, oh, we're going to start a business instead of being a graduate thesis? Thank you.
It's a funny reason why we became a business. We had started, it was going to be his PhD thesis. We did want to release it to the public and everything, but it wasn't clear that it was going to be a company until at some point we had, at that point we had hired a few people to work, but it was all inside Carnegie Mellon University. And I was using my grant money. I had a National Science Foundation grant and also a MacArthur Fellowship that we were using to hire people inside Carnegie Mellon University. At some point, we realized we needed to hire like 10 more people. And I thought, okay, well, 10 more people. I did the calculation. I'm like, okay, I need a $4 million grant. Okay? And then I thought, well, I'm going to go and apply for a $4 million grant from the National Science Foundation. And it was like a 60-page long application that I needed to do. And at the time, I got introduced to Union Square Ventures. And after one conversation, they're like, sure, we'll give you $4 million. And so that is when we decided it was much easier to turn it into a company. So we turned it into a company. Literally, that was the reason. I mean, and I'm not saying that we were never going to turn it into a company. It just that became very clear that it was better as a company rather than inside.
Allowed you to avoid red tape, didn't it? Okay, one last question from that gentleman over there.
Hi, Elliot Castillo, fellow Chapin.
Nice.
Actually,
That means he's from Guatemala.
yes. Kind of a two-part question. One, does the rearview mirror on the corner of a motorcycle actually count as a motorcycle? Like,
I don't know.
okay. So the second one is, in like facing the pressures of investors, facing the pressure of, I guess, mortgages and paying grad students, et cetera, how have you actually maintained this mission-driven focus that you're just exuding this whole time?
I'll tell you my honest belief, and I think everybody at Duolingo believes this. Some people may say, oh, well, the mission, which we really do have a very mission-driven company, is at odds with, say, the stock market. I wholeheartedly believe they are not. I wholeheartedly believe that the things that we do that are good for the mission actually end up being good for our stock price over the long term. The big difference is the time frame with which you look at it. For sure, if I wanted to make more money tomorrow, I would jack up the prices, I would, quadruple the ad load, and I would make more money tomorrow, and our stock price would go up tomorrow. But I would pay for it 3 years from now, because now that Duolingo has quadrupled the ad load, our actual growth would stall, et cetera. So I'm pretty sure I have yet to find a decision that we have had to make that was for the mission, that wasn't actually good for the stock price in the long term. So I really believe that if you take the long view, and which we do, we want to be a 100-year company. If we take the long view, the mission is actually better for the stock price rather than doing quick wins. I'm a wholehearted believer in that, and so is the executive team and everybody at the company. So I think, and now, am I right? I can't prove to you that I'm right. I may be wrong. But given the fact that we believe this, that is very easy for us to put those two together, because we're like, well, we're just going to do what we think is good for the long term of the business. And then it becomes much easier.